There are moments in life when the weight of sorrow presses so heavily upon the heart that every instinct urges us to speak, to pour out our pain, to explain ourselves, to justify our feelings to the world. We want someone to understand, someone to stand beside us and declare to others that we were right, that we were mistreated, that we are not as broken as they think. But what if I told you that in these moments, God's instruction is the opposite, that His whisper to your soul is not speak, but be silent. Silence in sadness is not the absence of courage, it is the presence of trust. It is the act of stepping back from the noise of human opinion to let heaven's verdict be the only one that matters. When your heart is aching and your name is being dragged through the dust, there is a divine strength in refusing to defend yourself, not because you are weak, but because you are letting God be your defender. We forget that the deepest work of God often happens in the quiet, just as seeds break open in the dark soil without anyone watching. Your healing, your vindication, and your restoration are being prepared in a silence that the world will never understand. You don't need to explain the depth of your sadness to those who caused it, nor to those who are quick to judge it. There is a reason God sometimes closes your mouth, because there are words that, if spoken in the heat of pain, would give the enemy ammunition and would rob you of the victory God is shaping in secret. Your sadness is not a public trial, it is a sacred meeting between you and your Creator. Some wounds are too holy to be displayed before spectators. God is not ignoring you when He asks you to be silent. He is protecting you, protecting your peace, protecting your future, protecting your destiny from being derailed by the carelessness of human responses. Think of the Savior Himself. In His moment of deepest betrayal, when accusations rained down upon Him and false witnesses filled the air with lies, He remained silent before those who sought to destroy Him, not because He had no answer, but because He knew that the only answer that mattered would come from His Father. And in that silence, heaven was moving. So, if you are in a season where your heart is heavy and your tongue is tied, do not mistake it for abandonment. You are in the care of the One who sees beyond the moment, who guards your words so your enemies cannot twist them, who hides your wounds until they become scars of glory. Your silence is not the end of your story. It is the pause before God turns the page. When pain strikes, it's almost instinctive to speak, to vent, to cry out not only to God but to people. We want someone to validate what we feel, to acknowledge that our pain is real and that we are not overreacting. We want to explain our side of the story, especially when false words have been spoken about us. Yet there is a deeper spiritual reality at play, one that is far more powerful than human sympathy. God sometimes calls you to silence, not because your voice doesn't matter, but because He wants your trust to speak louder than your words. Trust is not proven in moments of joy, it is forged in moments of uncertainty, when your mind is racing with everything you could say to defend yourself, but you choose not to. This choice does not come from weakness, it comes from a higher form of strength, the kind that believes God's timing is better than your own, and His defense is more effective than anything you could arrange. You see, when you speak in your sadness, you risk speaking from the wound instead of from wisdom. Wounds make us desperate. They push us toward hasty explanations, emotional outbursts, and words we can never take back. In those moments, the enemy delights, because a single sentence, spoken from hurt, can undo months, even years of your witness and influence. But when you remain silent, you take that power out of His hands. You refuse to let pain dictate your voice. Think of how God worked with His people in the wilderness. There were times when He told them to be still, not to rush into battle, not to retaliate against those who mocked them. Why? Because the outcome was his responsibility, not theirs. When you are sad, you are vulnerable. And when you are vulnerable, your discernment can be clouded. God knows this. That's why he steps in, not to take away your right to speak, but to guard you from speaking in a way that could harm the very future he's preparing for you. And here is the truth most people miss. Silence is a language heaven understands. In your quiet surrender, God hears volumes. Every tear is a sentence. Every pause is a paragraph. Every moment you resist the urge to explain yourself is an unspoken prayer that says, "Father, I trust you to handle this." This is why some of the greatest victories in Scripture began with stillness. It's also why your silence frustrates your enemies. Those who want to see you crumble rely on your reaction. They want you to speak too soon, to lash out, to give them proof they can use against you. But silence leaves them with nothing. It confuses them. It forces them to wonder what you know that they don't. And in that wondering, God is already working behind the scenes. So when God says, "Be silent in your sadness," it's not a command to swallow your pain forever. It's a call to place your pain in his hands so that your voice, when it returns, carries the weight of victory rather than the residue of sorrow. One of the greatest dangers in speaking during your sadness is that your words may fall into the wrong ears. Not every listener is safe. Some will nod in sympathy while mentally storing your pain as a story to share with others. Some will appear to care, but will quietly rejoice at your struggles, feeding on your vulnerability like it's their entertainment. God knows this, and so he sometimes closes your mouth, not to punish you, but to protect you. In times of sadness, you are at your most open. The walls you normally keep around your heart are weakened, and you're more likely to reveal things you would usually guard. The enemy knows this. That's why, when you're hurting, he often sends people who seem to be helpers, but are really harvesters. Harvesters of your words, your fears, your weaknesses. These individuals don't want your healing. They want your confession of despair so they can use it to diminish you. God's protection over you is not just physical, it is emotional, mental, and spiritual. He shields your heart from being mishandled by the wrong people. There are moments when he will place such a weight on your spirit that you simply cannot speak about what you're going through. You might try, but the words won't come. That is not coincidence. That is divine intervention. Think about Jesus again, standing before Pilate, the crowd shouting accusations. He could have answered every question. He could have cleared his name with one sentence, but he didn't. Because he knew the hearts of those listening. He knew they didn't want truth. They wanted blood. And the same is true for you. There are those who don't want to understand you. They want to see you exposed, weakened, and defeated. Your silence in sadness is a form of spiritual armor. It keeps your deepest wounds from being inspected by careless hands. It prevents your enemies from gaining insight into your current battle. It protects your hope from being crushed by people who have no intention of helping you carry it. In fact, there are battles you will win precisely because you told no one you were fighting them. The fewer voices in the room, the clearer God's voice becomes. And when the victory comes, no one can claim they were the reason. It will be obvious that it was the hand of God alone. By keeping your mouth shut in your sadness, you're not just avoiding trouble, you're safeguarding the sacred work God is doing inside you. The wrong listeners cannot sabotage what they do not know, and when God finally reveals the outcome, the surprise will be sweeter because it will be untainted by human interference. When something is hurting you deeply, the natural impulse is to take action. You want to fix it, change it, explain it, or at the very least make sure people know your side of the story. The thought of sitting still and saying nothing can feel unbearable. But here is the problem. When you try to control the narrative in your own power, you can unknowingly interfere with what God is doing on your behalf. Think about the master artist who is painting a masterpiece. If you were to constantly step into his studio, grab the brush, and add your own strokes, you would distort the vision in his mind. The only way for the masterpiece to be revealed in its fullness is for you to let him work uninterrupted. This is exactly how it is with God. When he tells you to keep quiet, he's telling you to let him have full control of the situation, to stop inserting your voice into a place where only his voice can bring the outcome you need. When we speak too soon, we can undo the quiet work God is doing in the background. He is not just arranging events, he is arranging hearts. He is softening certain people, exposing hidden motives, bringing truths into the light, and preparing divine timing. And here's the reality. Some of that work can only be done in silence. When you speak prematurely, you can alert those who would try to block your blessing, giving them a chance to interfere before God's plan is ready to be revealed. There is also a spiritual dimension to silence that most overlook. Your words are not just heard by people, they are heard in the unseen realm. The enemy listens too, and the more information you give him, the easier it becomes for him to attack you strategically. By holding your tongue, you are not just keeping secrets from people, you are keeping strategies hidden from spiritual forces that would love to derail what God has planned. In moments of sadness, God's work often looks invisible. You may feel like nothing is happening because you cannot see it, but silence is a seed, and seeds grow underground before they ever break the surface. You might be tempted to dig it up, to check on its progress, but doing so would only delay the harvest. Your silence allows God to finish the work without constant disturbance. And when God finally moves, it is always in a way that leaves no doubt about who was in control. You won't have to prove you were right, because the outcome will speak for itself. Those who doubted you will be silenced by the evidence of God's favor. Those who opposed you will be humbled, not by your argument, but by his undeniable hand. This is why the instruction to be still and know that I am God is not passive, it's active trust. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do in your sadness is to stay quiet and let heaven speak for you. Pain has a way of weakening the body, but it also has the power to strengthen the spirit if handled correctly. One of the ways God uses sadness for your growth is by training you to master your tongue. Speaking freely in the heat of emotion might give temporary relief, but it does little to strengthen your inner life. Silence, on the other hand, builds endurance, discipline, and an unshakable trust in God. Every time you resist the urge to defend yourself, you are practicing spiritual self-control. Self-control is not simply about avoiding sinful actions. It is about learning to hold back even the good and truthful things when it is not the right time to say them. This kind of restraint requires strength far beyond human willpower. It requires divine assistance. And every time you lean on God for that strength, your spirit grows more resilient. Speaking in sadness often keeps your focus on the wound. You rehearse the pain over and over, telling it in different ways to different people, and with every telling, you relive it. Silence breaks this cycle. It forces you to process your pain with God, instead of feeding it with constant repetition. Over time, this habit shifts your source of comfort from human validation to divine affirmation. There is also a sacred intimacy that develops between you and God when you keep your pain between the two of you. In those quiet moments, you learn to hear his voice more clearly. The noise of other opinions fades, and you begin to recognize the subtle ways he is guiding you. It's in the stillness that he reminds you who you are, that your worth is not defined by your circumstances, and that your story is far from over. Silence in sadness also trains you for the future. Life will bring more challenges, and the discipline you learn now will serve you later. The ability to remain composed when under emotional pressure is one of the greatest spiritual assets you can have. It keeps you from making impulsive decisions, from burning bridges you might later need to cross, and from saying things that would take years to repair. Over time, you'll notice something remarkable. Your silence will start to bring you peace. What once felt like an unbearable restraint will become a protective shield. You will feel lighter because you no longer carry the burden of convincing people to understand you. Instead, you carry the assurance that God understands you completely. And as your spirit grows stronger, you'll find that your sadness loses its power to define you. You'll be able to walk through trials with a quiet confidence, knowing that silence is not your defeat, it's your preparation. It's God fortifying your soul for the next chapter of your journey. Some wounds are too sacred to be displayed before the world. They are not meant for public inspection or for the careless hands of those who do not understand their depth. When God tells you to be silent in your sadness, it is often because he wants to guard the healing process from outside contamination. Healing is delicate in its early stages. Just like a physical wound needs to be covered so it can mend without infection, your emotional and spiritual wounds also require protection. If you speak too soon, you open those wounds to environments that are not sterile. Places where doubt, gossip, criticism, or even misplaced pity can slow your recovery. God understands this in a way that you might not fully grasp in the moment. That's why he sometimes keeps you in a quiet, hidden place where your heart can mend without unnecessary interference. There is also a danger in constantly discussing your pain. It keeps the wound fresh. Every time you retell your story in the rawness of sadness, you are opening the injury. What could be healing is instead kept alive by repetition. This is why God often instructs his people to meditate on his promises rather than narrate their problems to everyone. Silence creates an atmosphere where the mind can shift from the injury to the cure, from the betrayal to the restoration, from the injustice to the redemption. Consider how the most profound works of transformation in nature happen in hidden spaces. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly in the secrecy of a cocoon. Seeds sprout into life beneath the soil, away from sight. A child grows in the unseen safety of a mother's womb. In the same way, your heart often heals best in silence, away from the glare of public opinion. And here's another layer of truth. Your silence not only protects your healing, but also deepens it. When you process your pain directly with God, you bypass the temptation to seek validation from people who may not understand your journey. You learn to depend on his comfort rather than human consolation. Over time, this builds an unshakable intimacy with him, a kind of spiritual closeness that words could never fully describe. Your healing is a holy thing. Not everyone deserves a seat in that process. Not every voice should be allowed to speak into it. Silence acts like a guard at the door of your heart, letting in only what God approves. It shields you from premature exposure, ensuring that when your story is finally told, it's not from the rawness of pain, but from the power of victory. In the end, silence isn't about withholding your story forever. It's about allowing the story to mature. When the time comes, your testimony will be stronger, clearer, and more impactful because it wasn't rushed into the open before it was ready. When sadness consumes you, it's easy to let your words drift into despair. Without realizing it, you can speak things that directly oppose the promises God has made over your life. You might declare defeat before the battle is over. You might curse a season that is actually meant to bless you. In the rawness of pain, you might even question God's love or doubt His faithfulness. This is another reason God calls you to keep quiet in your sadness, because your words carry power. Scripture tells us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. When your emotions are wounded, your mouth can become a weapon against yourself. By keeping you silent, God is protecting you from releasing words that could limit what He is building in your life. Think of the Israelites in the wilderness. Many times their complaints, in moments of hardship, delayed their own blessings. Their mouths spoke frustration instead of faith, and as a result, their journey to the promised land was extended. It wasn't that God's promise had changed. It was that their words kept aligning them with doubt instead of trust. Your silence in sadness is God's way of ensuring you don't sabotage the very miracle He's preparing for you. There is also a spiritual principle here. When God is constructing something new in your life, it often requires your agreement. That agreement is not just in your heart, it's in your speech. If you speak against what He is doing, even unintentionally, you risk delaying its completion. Silence becomes a safeguard. It's like a divine pause button that keeps you from interfering with the blueprint He's working on. It's also worth noting that in times of sadness, your words are more likely to be misunderstood. Even those who love you may misinterpret what you say when it's born out of deep pain. You might speak in a way that sounds hopeless when in reality you're simply tired. You might share something as a temporary thought, but others could take it as your final belief. God prevents these complications by asking for your silence. Until you are speaking from a place of clarity and strength, silence gives God the room to shift your perspective. It keeps you from locking yourself into a narrative of defeat before you've seen the end of the story. It allows Him to replace words of despair with words of hope, so that when you do speak, your language aligns with the victory He has already written for you. Ultimately, keeping your mouth shut in sadness isn't about bottling up your emotions. It's about protecting the alignment between your heart and God's promises. It's about ensuring that your voice, when it returns, is a voice of faith, not fear. It's a holy restraint, one that shields both your future and the work of God's hands in your life. One of the most difficult truths to accept in times of sadness is that God's timing rarely matches ours. When you're hurting, you want resolution now. You want answers, clarity, and restoration immediately. You want the misunderstanding to be cleared up, the injustice to be corrected, the betrayal to be exposed, and the wrong to be made right today. But God's way of working is different. He is not bound by your clock or your calendar. His goal is not just to fix the situation. It is to use the situation to refine you, elevate you, and reveal Himself through the outcome. This is why silence is so vital. If you rush to speak, to defend yourself, or to demand immediate resolution, you risk stepping ahead of God's perfect timing. His vindication often comes in ways that are far greater than anything you could orchestrate on your own, but it requires patience, a patience that is often sustained through quiet trust rather than constant talking. There is a powerful pattern throughout Scripture of God asking His people to be still while He moves. At the Red Sea, Moses told the Israelites, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." They were trapped between the water and their enemies, but their silence allowed God's glory to be revealed in a miraculous parting of the sea. If they had tried to negotiate or explain themselves to Pharaoh in that moment, they would have missed the miracle entirely. The same is true for you. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stay quiet and let God's plan unfold. Silence becomes the posture of faith. It's the stance of someone who believes that God's defense is better than any argument they could make. It's the confidence of knowing that the one who knows the full truth will speak for you when the time is right. And here's the thing about God's vindication. It's never partial. When He steps in, He doesn't just clear your name, He elevates you. He doesn't just expose the lies, He uses them to highlight His favor on your life. He doesn't just restore what you lost, He multiplies it. But you have to give Him the space to do it His way. Silence also protects the element of surprise in God's timing. If you speak too soon about what He's doing, you alert both people and spiritual forces who may try to block it. By staying silent, you allow His plan to move forward without resistance, so that when it's revealed, it's undeniable. Your enemies will be forced to watch as He prepares a table before you in their presence, and they will have no choice but to see the goodness of the Lord in your life. Another reason silence is powerful in relation to God's timing is that it keeps you from settling for less. In your sadness, you might be tempted to accept a lesser form of resolution just to end the discomfort. You might want to force a quick fix instead of waiting for the full blessing God intends. But when you are silent, you resist the urge to rush, and you leave the door open for God to deliver something far better than you imagine. In this way, your silence is not passive, it's active participation in God's plan. It's your way of saying, Lord, I trust you enough to let you write the ending without my interference. It's surrender, but not defeat. It's restraint, but not weakness. And it's this kind of faith-filled silence that positions you for the kind of vindication that leaves no room for doubt about who fought your battle. When you keep your mouth shut in your sadness, you're not losing your voice, you're saving it for the moment when it will matter most. You're reserving it for the testimony that will one day glorify God far more than any defense you could give today. My friend, there is a holy strength in keeping silent when your heart is breaking. The world will tell you to speak up, to fight back, to make your case. But heaven whispers something different. Be still, let me speak for you. Your silence is not a sign that you are defeated. It's a sign that you are surrendered to the one who never loses. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows that God's justice does not need human assistance to be complete. In your sadness, silence becomes your shield. It protects you from the wrong listeners. It guards the sacredness of your healing. It prevents you from speaking against your own blessing, and it aligns you with the timing of heaven. Most importantly, it keeps you in the place where God's vindication can be fully revealed, pure, undeniable, and perfect. One day, the tears you cry in silence will become the testimony you share in joy. One day, the same people who misunderstood you will see God's hand so clearly in your life that they will have nothing left to say. One day, you will realize that your quiet trust was not wasted. It was the very thing that positioned you for victory. So hold your tongue, hold your peace, let your silence speak the loudest word of all. I trust my God more than I trust my feelings. And when the time is right, He will open your mouth, not to explain your pain, but to declare His glory.